In April 1500, Portuguese explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral spotted a high, round mountain on the horizon and named it Monte Pascoal. Today, historians avoid calling this the discovery of Brazil. It was an occupation. The Portuguese had not stumbled onto an empty, pristine wilderness. This vast territory was already home to millions of indigenous people, with complex, established cultures and networks spanning the continent. Look at this historical European engraving of a Botocudo chief and his family. The colonizers cataloged these original inhabitants through a lens of total alienation. The Portuguese arrived sweating in heavy, layered clothing, entirely unsuited for the tropical climate, staring in bewilderment at people perfectly adapted to their environment. The relationship that followed was a tragedy. Within the first decades of the colony, indigenous populations were pushed off their ancestral lands. Millions died, largely victims of foreign diseases brought across the Atlantic by the Europeans. This map shows the early Portuguese Empire. Colonizers clung to the beaches like crabs, concentrating on the northeastern coast to export sugar. To run massive plantations, with the indigenous population devastated, the Crown industrialized human trafficking, importing millions of enslaved Africans directly to these hubs. The brutal journey across the Atlantic killed countless captives. When the survivors arrived, plantation owners deliberately mixed people from entirely different African regions. By grouping individuals who spoke different languages and shared no common background, they engineered a system designed to prevent communication and block organized uprisings. But resistance happened anyway. The geography of the vast country allowed for the creation of Quilombos. A Quilombo was an independent, self-sustaining community formed by enslaved people who had escaped their captors. These hidden settlements carved out autonomous life right on the edge of the plantation system. The entirety of Brazil's early economic engine ran on this violent, highly unstable system of human extraction. The massive profits generated from the sugar trade came at the cost of deep, permanent social fractures built into the colony from day one. Eventually, the colonizers broke away from the coast. A rough, rugged group of frontiersmen, known as the Bandeirantes, began hacking their way into the deep interior. They marched through the untamed jungle, violently capturing more indigenous people and claiming vast stretches of territory for the Portuguese crown. Deep in the rugged terrain, they found exactly what the Spanish had found in Mexico and Peru centuries earlier: metal. The Bandeirantes struck massive deposits of gold and diamonds in a region that soon earned the name Minas Gerais, or General Mines. This chart illustrates the immediate demographic shock. For the first time, a massive wave of white European immigrants rushed inland. The center of gravity for the colony shifted violently from the northeastern sugar coast down into the central southern interior. As astronomical wealth flowed out of the ground, the Portuguese crown clamped down, demanding a steep cut through heavy taxation. The local elites, holding the gold, began to resent the European metropole taking their profits, sparking the first serious, organized movements for regional independence. Portugal responded with absolute force. They dismantled the most prominent uprising, the Inconfidência Mineira, and condemned its members. To instill maximum fear, they staged a spectacular, theatrical hanging of a key rebel, known as Tiradentes, whose stone statue now stands as a monument to that defiance. By the late 18th century, the colony's interior held more wealth and people than the coast. This territory possessed an independent identity that made its subservience to a tiny European metropole geographically and economically absurd. Then, in 1808, European politics forced a bizarre historical anomaly. Napoleon's armies marched on Portugal. Facing imminent invasion and capture, King João VI packed up his entire royal court and fled across the Atlantic Ocean. The Portuguese monarchy established its new permanent headquarters in Rio de Janeiro, constructing palaces and importing artists to build a new center for their global empire. Dom João enacted one critical policy that broke the colonial system forever. He officially opened Brazilian ports to friendly nations, primarily the British Empire. This map shows the result. Trade ships no longer had to stop in Lisbon. England gained direct access to Brazilian markets, ending Portugal's exclusive economic monopoly. In a unique historical reversal, the European metropole now functioned as a dependency, while the South American colony operated as the administrative heart of the empire. When the dust settled in Europe, King João VI eventually returned to a politically weakened Portugal, but he made a calculated move. He left his son, Dom Pedro I, behind in Brazil to rule as regent. Dom Pedro found himself caught between two massive forces. The political courts back in Portugal demanded that Brazil be stripped of its privileges and downgraded back to a restricted colony. Meanwhile, the powerful local Brazilian elites pushed him to secure their newfound autonomy. The tension broke in 1822. By the Ipiranga River, Dom Pedro severed ties with Portugal, famously drawing his sword and declaring Brazil's independence. While neighboring nations fought bloody, grassroots wars for independence, Brazil's elite managed a transitio transata, a negotiated transition to maintain their own authority. The resulting compromise was unique. While neighboring countries fragmented into republics, Brazil maintained its vast territorial borders by establishing itself as an independent empire, keeping a European monarch on the throne to guarantee stability for the ruling class. It was a conservative revolution. The Declaration of Independence cut the political leash to Lisbon, but it deliberately protected the massive estates of the local elites and maintained the brutal institution of slavery. The nation broke free from Europe, yet meticulously locked in the profound social inequalities that continue to shape Brazil today.